Alright guys, so a lot of this process is making sure you have the right parts and the right tools. And again, I'm not trying to sell stuff, I'm just trying to point out what I'm using, because if somebody had done this for me and I had everything lined up, it would have saved a lot of time. So for the doors, to attach the bubble doors to the frame, it calls for using these supplied screws with an acorn nut. And so these would stick all the way through the metal frame of the door, and then that leaves this acorn nut sticking out on the inside of the door. And I'm not a huge fan of that look. You can bump your head on these getting in and out. So some of you guys had on the forum had posted that you used Rivnuts, and I think it's a much cleaner look. And so this is what a Rivnut is. It's just a little, you then use a tool, a rivet tool, squeezer, that's threaded. It threads into that base, and when you squeeze it, and it squeezes it down and locks it in place on the inside of the metal. It's a Rivnut. So you rivet that in place, and then you can put the screw into the frame, and it doesn't go all the way through the other side. Found stainless steel. They are 8-32s. They're 1/2 inch long on the screws, which after seeing them, they may not be long enough when I put on the weather stripping that goes between the acrylic and the frame. So I may have to actually order some longer ones. And then the Rivnuts are again 8-32, stainless steel. Okay, as far as the rivet puller goes, it is a Astro pneumatic tool company. There are some fancier ones out there, but I've done a couple practice pulls with this, and it works fine. So I'll go back into my Amazon history, create a link for that, so you guys have a source for that as well. The kit came with some acrylic specific drill bits. I've been reading up on that. You want to make sure that it's all at room temperature, which it's not in here. I'm actually freezing right now. It's about 40 degrees in the garage. But there's a supplement here, and I'll scan this and show you, but it's for the bubble door installation, and it kind of works with the directions for the standard door installation. And there's kind of a problem as far as the sequencing goes. One of them has you apply the plastic to the door before locating and mounting the hinges that allow the door to open and close. The other one doesn't. The other one says go ahead and put those in place and mount the door frame. The bubble door instructions say that, and then do the acrylic. The problem is that the hinge mounts on the outside of the acrylic, so the space in between the door frame and where you're going to mount the hinge on top on the little flange will be different if you don't have the thickness of the acrylic, and you also have this weather stripping that goes between the frame and the acrylic door. So I'm not going to put the hinges, these are what the hinges look like, on the door frame until after I'm done mounting up the acrylic bubble door to the frame. So hopefully through this video and my learning process, I can make it more clear on how to do this installation. So in order to cut the acrylic, I ordered these diamond coated Dremel tool saw blades, and so I'll be using those to cut the acrylic. That's where I'm working today. Pretty nervous about this one because any mistakes are very costly, because these doors are expensive. So I'm going to do one without worrying about the filming, so I can focus on it and make my mistakes. I should probably do the passenger side first, because that one I won't look at all the time. But I'm going to do it's already set up, so I'm going to do the pilot side first. And once I figure out how to do that one, I'll film the second one. And hopefully my goal is to have better tips and instructions than this one-page explanation of how to do this. Okay, so I'm working on these door Rivnuts. You can see placing them in the door frame here. Couple little pointers here. One, if you over squeeze with this tool, it will strip the threads out of the Rivnut. Now I don't know if that's because the quality of these that I ordered off Amazon's not very good, but the Rivnut itself is much weaker than the puller. So if you squeeze too tight, it will strip them out. So I've got one that's a problem, and I got to figure out what to do about that. So if you screw this thing on here, the other problem is that the depth of the puller will contact the back side of the wall that we're sticking in, so it won't go in all the way. So you can see that. So you have to back the threading out so that it's flush with the bottom of the rib nut. So when you do that, you're almost, well, you are full clearance on the squeeze before it even starts squeezing. So what I've done is I've added 3 washers to the puller to get the right depth, so that when you squeeze it, it actually engages the squeezer. That has helped. The one that I screwed up, I didn't do that on, and I just backed off the thread so that it wasn't fully gripped, and it ripped the threads out of the top of it. So the other trick is when you're drilling these holes into the door frame, all the shavings, or some of the shavings, can drop into the hole, and then you're going to have this rattle inside the door frame forever, okay? So what I do is I just grab the vacuum, turn it on as I'm drilling, and suck up all those shavings. Little trick, it'll help you from keeping, from getting all that stuff inside the door frame, because otherwise you can't get it out. Okay, so here's the bubble door installation on the co-pilot side. So what I've done so far is glued with a hot glue gun these spacers in the door well, and then placed the door frame in position. It's a much tighter fit on the co-pilot side than it was on the pilot side, quite a bit tighter. I had a whole extra spacer at the top on the other side. So you might run into that variation in the with the door frames. Now these have all been riv nutted already. So those are all in place all the way around. See there? Except for on top. Now the reason I didn't do the ones on top is because I want to position the hinge underneath this tab, and then there's a bolt that goes through the hinge which will hold the plexiglass there and here all the way through. I may add a riv nut in the middle if it's necessary, or 2, maybe one here and one here. But until I get that hinge in place, I didn't want to decide on those. In the supplemental bubble window installation guide, it really shows that position of the bolt to hold the plexiglass really right in this area right here, which is too close to the hinge. So I wouldn't do that until you place the hinges. Next, I will position the plexiglass on the door frame and mark where it needs to be cut, and then cut it to size. And then once that plexiglass, or acrylic, I keep calling it plexiglass, but it is acrylic. Once it's cut to size and fits inside this recessed door well, then I can mark, because I can see through it, I can mark the points where I'm going to drill through the the acrylic and attach it to the door frame. To show you, I think I already have video of the other one, but this is the pilot side door.
It's already been drilled, and the plastic protective sheet is still on the acrylic itself. Those aren't cracks, that's just the protective sheet. And the weather stripping hasn't been placed between the door frame and the acrylic yet. And that's just because there's some final tuning to do, and then need to mount the door frame to the fuselage. So the pilot side's done, working on the co-pilot side right now, and I'll let the camera run while we're doing that. Alright guys, so one of the things I was having trouble trying to figure out is how to position this plexiglass on the frame to mark off where it needs to be cut, because these tabs get in the way. So here's the solution I came up with. There is a bend in the fuselage side right here and right here that also lines up with this bend in the door, both front and back, very defined bend in the door. So if you take those bends right here and right here and line them up with the fuselage, put the top above those tabs, line it up about like that. Okay, so that's going to give you the general up and down position of the plexiglass. And then you can put your body weight against it. And I took a Sharpie and just marked where those tabs touch the plexiglass, okay, or the acrylic. Now I'm going to draw a line between those points. You can see it. I'm going to draw a line between those 2 points and then cut that off at the top here. That'll give me the space underneath the tab to line up the rest of the acrylic and mark it for cutting. So that's kind of an important trick that they don't talk about in the instructions. So hopefully that will help you guys get the plexiglass positioned properly. Okay, so I cut the top strip off, which allows me to get the plexiglass underneath these tabs. And I just have a couple clamps holding it in position. Next thing you're going to look for is the bubble comes around and there's kind of a line where the bubble flattens out and then it's just a flat tab. You can see that line runs around like this, right down here, and along the bottom, same thing. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that flat portion where the bubble rounds out to, it's flat around the edge where it's going to mount. So I've got a little bit of room to come this way and a little bit of room to come up further. So I gotta look down here and see I'm still on the bubble portion along the bottom here where it's going to mount to the frame by quite a bit. Matter of fact, it's a good ½ inch. It needs to go up further. So although that was a good starting point, I could get it on here and mark it. I need to go up further in order to get that flat spot. Otherwise you're going to be putting too much pressure on the bubble where it attaches to the frame, and it's going to crack it. So this will have to come off again. I'll have to redo that cut I just did by taking more off. So what I'll do is I'll measure how much more and then just take that door up a bit more. So I have, you can see right here, this is where it flattens out. So I've got that much space to move up if I need it. And that's about the same amount that I needed to come up from the bottom. So left and right wise, you know, I haven't cut anything there yet, so I still have plenty to work with. So it's kind of trial and error fit, but now that I've cut that top portion off and I can actually put it in place, I can see what I need to do to make it fit now. All right, so I retrimmed the top of the door to get the height on the bottom so that it has the flat spot all the way around the door frame. And now I've taken the tape and marked the edge of the inset all the way around the frame. And now I will take it off and cut along the inside edge of that tape, and that should give me the final cut. I may have to sand it a little bit like I did on the pilot side door to get a good fitment, but for right now that's all trimmed and ready to go. So let me do the cut and then we'll see how it fits. Okay, so it was about 6 inches to go on the final cut, and my Dremel tool just completely went up in smoke. So it smells pretty bad in here right now. I've got it sitting out here on the ground. I ran the air compressor on it to cool it down for quite a while, but it is out. So I got to go get a new Dremel tool. All right, ladies and gents, so ran over to Home Depot, picked up a Dremel 3000. It's not the top of the line one, but didn't want to drop $100 on a new Dremel. It was about $70. So finished that last 6-inch cut. I'm sure it will come in handy again when I'm doing the little windows right here and the turtle deck and also the windshield. So I didn't want to get a knockoff from my Harbor Freight or anything. I went ahead and went with the Dremel brand. So anyway, so the Copilot door is now cut to shape. It came out real nice. It's recessed in. You can see the spacing. I gave myself a little bit extra room on this one versus the Copilot side, or the Pilot side. Pilot side, I ended up having to do a lot of sanding, and it still fits too tight. So a little bit more room on this one. A little bit, maybe like a 16th all the way around. It still has plenty of overlap of more than a 1/4 inch on the door frame. So for the seal up, I think it would be great. So the next thing I do is I'm going to locate the mounting holes for the bubble to the frame. And I'll drill those out, get the acrylic screwed into the Rivnuts. And then the Copilot door will be basically done. I'm not going to fully mount the acrylic to the frames yet because I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to paint all the tube in the cockpit black. I don't like the white, but it's kind of a pain in the ass to change it. And this is powder coated, it's much more durable. So if I can find a good paint that won't be too difficult, I'm thinking about just doing the door frame. Pretty much just the stuff that will show, the cross tubes, and then pretty much like the upper bird frame here. I may do that in black. It'll go better with the paint schemes I'm looking for. So anyway, we'll get finished with that door and scratch the doors off of the to-do list, and we'll get moving on to the next project. We're getting pretty darn close to putting the fuselage aside and starting on the wings. I want to get everything so we can cover it all at once. Okay, so I did 4 of the screws through the acrylic while it was still in the door frame to make sure it's pretty held pretty securely to the frame before I took it off, because I don't want anything to adjust while I'm drilling these holes. I'll show you what I did. So I did one about here, and then on the other side, same thing. So I'll go ahead and go around and drill all these. All right, voila, the doors are fitted to the airframe, both pilot and Copilot side. So there's still a little bit of work to do on it. There's a weld right here on the door frame that sticks out quite a bit. So I wasn't able to get this screw in just yet because it's lifting the acrylic off. So I'm going to have to sand that down flush. I'll probably do the same thing over here on this weld, and the same thing on the other side, on the door on the other side. So once that's all sanded down, if I'm going to paint it black, I'll just do it then so I don't get any corrosion in there. So I'll sand it, paint them black if that's what I decide to do, and then they'll be good to go. So next, I can either place the hinges to the tabs, and then I need to do the gas strut mount, and then I have to do the door handle. So ×2 on all that. So although they're fitted, they're not done. So guys, I don't want you to think I spend all my time thinking about building and flying airplanes and helicopters. So I'm going to leave you with a little clip of my other hobby and my expert level of ability in bird calls.